Welcome to CityneighborhoodsNYC. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to focus on a photo shoot from August 25th, 2022. This photo shoot was taken in the neighborhood of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So if we go to our map here, you can see the layout of the photos that were taken. I walked a route that basically took me along the avenues, the north-south avenues through Williamsburg. But before we get to the photography, let's spend a few minutes talking about Williamsburg as a neighborhood in Brooklyn. Let me call up our City Neighborhoods map. And here you will see the Google map that I use as a working map of the different neighborhoods in New York City: Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx. And so, as I said, we are focusing today on Williamsburg, which is a neighborhood in the northern section of Brooklyn. We zoom on in, and you will see that Williamsburg is defined as the area east of the East River, to the west of the Brooklyn-Queens line and Newtown Creek here, north of Flushing Avenue, with the neighborhoods of Bedford-Stuyvesant and Bushwick to the south, and it is south of the Brooklyn neighborhood of Greenpoint. Now, most people, when they're discussing Williamsburg, will separate the region into two neighborhoods, one being South Williamsburg, which is delineated as the area south of Division Avenue and Broadway. This is the elevated train line along Broadway here. And South Williamsburg, as a neighborhood is notable because it is an area where there are a lot of Hasidic and Orthodox Jewish people living, and so they bring their culture and their traditions to that area, and it gives it a very distinct character that is separate from the rest of Williamsburg. However, if you'll notice, I've further separated Williamsburg into four other sections. There is East Williamsburg, Central Williamsburg, or Williamsburg proper, North Side Williamsburg, and South Side Williamsburg, also nicknamed Los Sures. If we zoom in here, we can see right away that there are some naming conventions at work here. For Los Sures, South Side, you'll notice that the streets are named with the south tag, so south, first, second, third, and so on, heading southward. On the flip side, North Side is named with the north convention, north first, second, third, and so on, going northward. But there's more that separates these two neighborhoods than just their naming conventions. North Side, as you can see, has a lot of commerce, a lot of restaurants and bars and things like that, nightlife. It also takes on a bit of a personality from Greenpoint here. South Williamsburg likewise has lots of places to go and visit. But as you get further south, where you have the Williamsburg Bridge, it's a little more industrial, and it does take on the characteristics of the people who were living there and how it got its name of Los Sures. So it's a Hispanic population traditionally, and that's how it got its name, and that's what helps differentiate it from North Side Williamsburg. Flipping on over here to East Williamsburg, this area is definitely much more industrial. In fact, I sometimes nickname East Williamsburg as Industrial Williamsburg. A lot of warehouses, factories, processing plants. It too has its share of nightlife and places to go out. Brooklyn Mirage is a concert venue. Roberta's is a pizza place, and if you like pizza, I strongly recommend giving Roberta's a try if you're ever in the area. But that definitely keeps East Williamsburg as a unique entity separate from the rest of the region. And of course, Central Williamsburg here has its own share of eateries, but it's also very residential. So that's Williamsburg in a nutshell. And as you will see, my route took me through portions of South Side and North Side Williamsburg. I did take a little bit of into Greenpoint here at the border of North Side and Greenpoint, and my route ended up heading through Central or Williamsburg proper. Okay, so with that, out of the way, let's jump back into our photography and continue with the work that I've been doing. I'm up to photo 506 out of 1119 in this photo shoot, so I'm about halfway through it. Just so you can see some details here, these photos were taken with my Canon EOS 6D Mark II, and I utilized 3 different lenses today on this day. The first of which was my EF 16-35 wide-angle lens, my EF 24-105 all-purpose lens, jack of all trades, so to speak, and the Tamron 28-300, which I use for zooming close in, and most often with, say, shots of the skyline of Manhattan. So here we were on the East River. If I wanted to zoom in on Manhattan and its skyline, the Tamron was very useful for framing these buildings, these skyscrapers, in such a way. The 16-35 is good for capturing the street level, things like that, or interiors of places. There's a good use of the interior shot for the 16-35. And of course, the vast majority of photos were taken with the 24-105 lens. Okay, so now that we've gone through the particulars, let's get straight into the developing. So, as I said, we were up here on photo 509. One of the newer buildings here in Williamsburg. Williamsburg is going through a bit of a revival. Now this began many years ago, but you know, you're still seeing brand new buildings being constructed, old ones being taken down. This is one of the newer ones. What I liked about this shot was the patterns in the glass, the patterns in the shape of the building, and its contrast with the sky above. So as I'm looking for ways to process it, I have to ask myself, do I want this to be sort of a photorealistic representation, something like this? Do you want it to be a little bit more hyper real, such as this, where it's not a pure representation of what was there, but you know, we get more of a highly detailed look at it? Or do I want to be a little more impressionistic? And you know, when I select this option here, right away, I do like this. You know, I like the way that the building sort of becomes a glow. It contrasts nicely with the sky. The sky is then sort of picked up a little bit in the windows. Overall, I think I like this presentation of the image a little bit better. Obviously, it still needs a little bit of work in terms of straightening. One of the things I like about Lightroom and processing these these photos, is that you're able to make these kinds of adjustments. You know, you can overcome some of the complications and limitations of shooting neighborhoods from the street level. You know, being able to get a more straight-on kind of look at this building, I think presents a little more aesthetically pleasing look to the overall final image than just leaving it, you know, as it was shot straight out of the camera. So, you know, this is out of the camera. It's not bad, actually. I like that, but certainly this feels a little bit better to me. I don't think there's much else we need to do with this. Sometimes I do like to add a little more detail back with the texture. By the way, it's the clarity that helps create this glow. If I slide that over, you can see it changes, right? So by decreasing the clarity, it gives this hazy look to it, and that's what creates this dreamlike presentation. Okay, moving on. A mural. I have this captured in another photo elsewhere from a previous photo shoot, and this one right away looks like it's a bit out of focus. Yeah. So this one, sadly, is not going to be something worthwhile to pursue. So we'll just move on to the next photo. And here we have the same subject as this one here. but from a slightly different angle. Here we see sort of the trellis above one of the rooftop terraces. Here we get a more longer look at the building, and sort of this increases this sense of geometry and pattern. In a way, this becomes a little bit more abstract because of that. So once again, we need to ask ourselves, do we want this to be sort of a realistic presentation? Do we want a more detailed but desaturated look? Do we want the saturated glowing look? You know, what I like about the glow here is the tree. So let's straighten this. Let me show you what I mean, how the tree helps complement this in this particular presentation. There we go. Nice. So we bring down the highlights just a little bit, bring up the shadows, and now you're going to start to see the tree really take on a bit of a personality. You know, in a previous stream, I mentioned Bob Ross and the oil painters that you would see on PBS, and how they would sort of take like a little bit of paint to do the highlights on the leaves of a tree. Well, if we take a look at this tree now, and then we bring up the yellows, a little bit of the greens, it's like we've just done that for this, right? Giving those a little bit of a highlight, a little bit of a touch there. And I like that. That adds some personality to this tree, whereas if it was just straight out the camera, it kind of gets lost. See that? See how it's just sort of lost here? I mean, we could still bring up the yellows and the greens here, but it just doesn't have the same feel as this does. I think this is the better presentation of the two. Is there anything else we want to do here? Did we want to add some more structure back in with the texture? Yeah, I think that works pretty well. So now we have to ask ourselves, you know, we have two very similar photos. There's this one here, and there's this one here. Which of the two do we like the best? Both have their merits. This has a bit more of the sky to it. But I'm also noticing you've got this I-beam here, this light pole here, and they do, even though they're nicely lined up with the building, they do sort of stand in the way a little bit. Whereas this one, our foreground elements of the leaves from the tree don't feel like they're standing in the way. They feel like they're adding some balance, and you even get that sort of carried over up here to this particular terrace. So I think we're going to go with this one over this one. We don't need both. They aren't different enough to really warrant keeping both. So I'm going to unflag this one and say, no, we did some nice work on that one, but this one is better overall. And I think we'll just go with this one. All right, here we go. Back to our subject here with the squirrel. For some reason, I just find this mural very interesting and compelling. Now, with this particular photo, not only do we have the wall art here, but we have the street tags here. We have some words of the prophets, as Simon and Garfunkel might say. Now, this feels like it might be helped along by that more hyper real. Yeah, I like that. I mean, if you go with the glowing, that's kind of cool too, and it sort of makes the street art sort of pop off the thing there. But I think there's so much going on here that if you're just focusing on this, that the rest of the image tends to get lost. Whereas if we use something like this, this sort of fades a little bit in prominence, but it also balances out the rest of the photo a little bit better, at least in terms of how I'm seeing it. So once again, let's add some straightening to here. Our upright tools that we use so often. Now, can we do anything with masking the sky versus the ground? If we take a look at the sky, if we bring down the highlights, bring up the haze, makes the sky a little bit more dramatic, make it a little bit more blue, little bit. And if we now work on the ground, let's warm this up a little bit. I think that'll help. Yes, I'd like the warmer. Can this be brighter? Yeah, it could be a little bit brighter. Maybe too much for the highlights. Okay. Contrast a little bit. Little bit. All right, so now here's our work. This was before our masks. Here's after. I think we're doing just fine. I do think it's a little too bright in the ground though. So let's bring that back just a little bit. Yes, I like this. This ends up being, you know, if we compare that to here, you can see what happened with our filters with the sky and ground, how that's sort of enhanced this particular presentation. Yeah, I think we're going to go with this one. Last question I have for myself is, do I want to do like a vignette with it? I like that, although it does cut that off there. What if I changed the Y offset? Brought this down a little bit. Do I have enough space to do that? Perhaps? Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like how, you know, vignetting can kind of, quite literally frames the image. But in so doing, it sort of gives it this constrained feeling where you're looking directly in the space. You're not feeling like you're expanding out of the image. It's sort of forcing your eyes back into the image. And I know, you know, some people may not appreciate having this artificial framing added to it, but I do like the way it sort of enhances certain images. In fact, you know, looking here at the shadows, you have the shadow of the stop sign and the street sign, the light pole connected to this, connect to the pole. It creates this sort of enclosed feeling within the image, which for me, at least personally, I quite like. And oh, by the way, just real quick, North Side Autocorp. So you can see that, you know, even within Williamsburg, people are aware of and do utilize these different naming conventions. So very good. Let's move on. Here I am trying to capture a street corner, the corner of a building. You know, and I'm looking at this. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's just quickly, because I feel like I don't like the angle here as is in camera, and I think if we straighten it, it's still not going to do particularly well. We can change the aspect a little bit, the Y offset a little bit. We can even decrease the oranges and the highlights to bring some more detail back, but you'll notice how this just sort of, it feels like you're falling off a cliff, and I don't think this works particularly well. So let's move on to the next image. Here we are. I am looking at the glass of this building, and what I'm seeing isn't the glass of the building, or even this fine fellow who was very confused at what I'm doing. Sorry, my friend. You weren't meant to be part of the image. But really what I'm focusing on is the reflection in the glass here. I've got another shot here, and here I've refocused and recalibrated and taken a more precise shot, even a little bit of a selfie. Hello there. So let's use this one instead of the other one. Now, one of the things I like to do when I'm out doing photos is think about geometry, think about light and shadow, and think about reflections. Those are sort of the things that my brain is most actively considering. And so here I saw a reflection. Now, how do I best represent that reflection in our processing? I could do something like this, where you get that glowing effect, and it kind of really brings your eye to this section here where the reflection is most prominent. This is sort of a more realistic, where you can kind of actually see into here, the building, the ceiling, which is interesting, but it also detracts from here. Black and white can be interesting sometimes too, because you're focusing on shape. You know what? I do think we're going to go with this one. with this filter again. I like this. I like this because it does sort of focus your attention here on the detail in the reflection. And it makes this sort of like a secondary sky. Let's level this out a little bit. Yep. That's looking pretty good. How about the sky? Can we make that a little bit more dramatic? Seems a bit washed out. And here we see our handy dandy tool is a little bit confused by what we're doing. So let's just remove some of the mask from the building at least. That's not too much. You know, I mentioned Bob Ross and the painters on PBS, and you know, you really have to admire artists from the non-digital era and how they were able to paint and create and work around mistakes like that I just had with my brush, right? There I went a little bit too far, but when you are painting and creating, you know, you have to be very precise and very adaptive. If you make a stroke that you did not intend, you know, you have to find a way to make that work within the context of your overall image. And, you know, unlike myself, where I have the luxury of the undo button, when you're painting in acrylics and you're doing it live on camera, you don't have that luxury. So you really have to admire, you know, artists that are working in a non-digital medium, because I really, you know, there's very few safety nets and ways to recover or recuperate from those kinds of missteps as you're working. Now, can I do anything with the building here? Again, let's remove a little bit of this here so we don't get too much of a halo around the building. Can we get away with warming it up a little bit? You know, I don't know that no, I don't think that works. What if I raise the shadows a little bit? Possibly. Yeah. Yeah, what I want to do, there we go. What I was looking for was sort of bringing out the detail of this part and not so much in this part. I think that those adjustments sort of balance that. So now if we look at our masks, we've created a much greater contrast in the different elements. You've got the sky being a bit more dramatic. You've got the dark blue that's being reflected in these windows. You've got the street level that's reflected here. These are almost like pillars of support. This ends up being pretty decent. Now I could try and straighten it with these sides here, but I think we'll just leave it as is. I think this perspective works well for this photo. Nice. All right. Let's work on just a couple more for this particular stream. Here we have a building with some street art along the side. Part of its advertising, actually. This kind of goes along with this building. You know, interesting little messages added in. Let's see. No, let's go with the black and white here. I know I like the colors here. The pastels are really nice. But I do like how black and white just sort of, yeah, I do like this. Let's try this out here. You know, this photo is particularly off in terms of framing, you know, in terms of balance and upright. That is something I really do need to improve upon in the field. That will save me time in post-processing, save information from the photo. You know, that's one of the things that personally, you know, as an artist, that I know that I need to work on, kind of getting that right, more right anyway, the first time around. But thankfully, again, we have Lightroom and the tools to sort of overcome those deficiencies in my photography. Let's move that over so now we capture the point of the pencil. Tell me something, anything. I like this. Lots of neat little messages. And let's do one more. We'll do, now there's a set of 4 here, and we'll pick probably just one from this 4, and then we'll move on. So here we can see the corner, an intersection. This would be at the intersection of Berry and North 6th Street. And so I'm trying to capture what this intersection is like. You'll notice there's a do not enter sign. This has been closed off to vehicular traffic for the most part. This is a pedestrian walkway at this time. And clearly you can see some bicyclists are able to overcome that particular barrier. So which of these is best represented? I mean, I like this one, how it captures the gate and the building. That has a bit more of a direct focus. There's also this one, which has, you know, the bicyclist. You know, when I have people involved, I tend to use this filter. You know, the other ones, this really focuses you in on the character of the person. So that's not bad. This might also be a candidate for the vignette effect. Yeah, that's a possibility. So we'll select that for now. And then we'll go here. Let's see, I don't think this is going to work yet. It's too bright of an image for this to work. Okay, we'll go with our deep blue sky here. It's also a little bit warmer in the shadows with this preset. And if we straighten it, again, what I like about this is it's clearer focus on the street corner here. As we adjust our upright settings. So now we have this image here. Would this benefit from a vignette? Debatable. I think we'll leave that off. All right, so now we're kind of between these 2 images. Can I do the comparison here? Ah, there we go. Okay. So here are our two images. Now, first of all, are they different enough to be able to warrant having both of them in our photo set when we're done? I don't think so. So which one would we rather have? You know, as I'm thinking about it, we already have a lot of photos of the buildings and the architecture. And, you know, by design, I don't really focus a whole lot on the people. I tend to focus more on the structures. So that, you know, when I do have an image that is populated, so to speak, I think that kind of takes precedent in a way. I think we're going to go with this one instead. It's a bit different from what we've been doing. You got our foreground bicyclist, you've got a background bicyclist, you've got pedestrians, you know, crosswalk in the middle of the street here. Gives you perspective of these 2. Overall, I think this is a more balanced composition. You can even see the lines here of, you know, the bicyclist lining up with the corner of the building with the crosswalk. So you kind of have this shape going here. Yeah, that works pretty well in my opinion. And so we'll select that. And with that, we're going to end this stream for this morning. Thank you for joining us here at CityneighborhoodsNYC. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed the insight into the creative process of taking a photo from the camera and creating a final presentation. I hope that you will join us in our next live stream. If you have not already done so, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really does help. And in the meantime, be well and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Bye.